I'm live. Here we go. Hey everybody. Great to catch up with you again for another Wednesday live. This week, as you can see from the title, we're talking about menopause. And let me just preface that by saying, why should I be talking about menopause? Because once upon a time, a few months ago, maybe even a couple of years ago, I did a post and the title was Why Managing Stress is Important in Menopause. And I got an interesting comment from somebody who said, why the hell should we listen to a middle-aged white guy talking about menopause? What the hell do you know? And I was slightly offended by that because, you know, I pride myself on the amount of time I take in terms of educating myself. I'm part of an ongoing program that is a significant investment in my business and myself in terms of my knowledge. And I believe that's one of the big points of difference that I have at Fit for Life. And I think, you know, anybody can apply themselves to learning on any subject and become very, very good at that. And I'm certainly not saying I'm an expert on menopause, but I have certainly learned a few things about it and how that can help my clients. And that's really my motivation. My motivation for learning is so that I can help my clients better. And obviously I have a number of female clients and probably more female than male. I'd say about a 70-30 split. So I think it's important for me to be interested in you know, the female hormonal state at all times of life, and particularly as we age, those things change. The balance of hormones change in the body. So, you know, schooling yourself up on this stuff, I think, is really, really good because there is some really good information out there, and I will drop some comments, some links in below this live to a couple of sources of information that I found really, really useful. So, you know, I'm going to reference where my information comes from because I think that's the right thing to do, as you would do in any, you know, well-respected publication. And so the first one is a lady called Dr. Wendy Sweet. Wendy Sweet is in this industry, and she actually started, she got personal training off the ground at Les Mills back in the 80s. She was officially probably the first personal trainer in New Zealand. And she worked with Les Mills to get that part of their business up and running. And since then, she's gone on to education areas and schooling herself up and presenting to others in the industry. And more recently, she did her PhD in menopause. And I guess that was meaningful for her because she was going through it herself. So she studied it and did her PhD. And then she turned that into a business. And what she did was she went online with all of the information that she had learnt over the course of her research for her PhD. And she even did a road show around New Zealand. And she kindly came to Greenhithe, and I hosted her at the local primary school here in Greenhithe a couple of years ago now, and had a room full in that school hall. Over 125 people turned up to hear her speak about menopause. So, you know, it's a very hot topic that people are interested in and wanting to learn more and understand how it works. And it works differently for everybody. So, you know, there are some patterns, but at the end of the day, depending on what's going on in your life, it will mean a different thing to you. So there's no sort of one particular way. So I thought I'd touch on elements of it. I'm not going to go into it in massive detail because we haven't got time, but I thought some of the key things that would be useful in terms of managing the symptoms. Some people cruise through it without symptoms, other people cruise through it less comfortably, and others really, really uncomfortable and have a rough journey. And one of the reasons for that rough journey is the fluctuation of hormones. So the hormonal levels, particularly we're talking about estrogen and progesterone, they typically fluctuate during a normal monthly cycle, and that's normal. So estrogen will kick in at the beginning of the month, and progesterone will kick in at the end of the month, very simply, through the luteal phase. And so the idea is to ovulate at the beginning of the month, and then to maintain that ovulation, so to hold on to an ovulation, so to keep that egg on board. The job of progesterone is to maintain the womb so that it stays intact, and then obviously go into pregnancy. And that's the natural pattern, but of course that can change. So things can disrupt estrogen and things can disrupt progesterone. So we're going to go into those a little bit now. So the definition of menopause is when you've had 12 clear months of no period. So 12 months since your last period. So that's occurs on one particular day, it's a calendar date, bang, that's menopause done. Leading up to that point, you are perimenopausal for about 12 years potentially. And then after menopause, you are postmenopausal. So once that has occurred, that 12 months, you're postmenopausal. So, that's it in a nutshell in terms of the peri and the actual menopause and the post. And what can happen over that period of time leading up to it is a slow but consistent decline in estrogen levels. So that's made in your body from the ovaries. The ovaries are responsible for creating that estrogen, but so are your adrenal glands, and your adrenal glands do other jobs as well. And so what happens when your ovaries start reducing their output, that actually asks more of the adrenal glands. And same with progesterone. So progesterone is made, so it's a sex hormone in the same way estrogen is, and it's made from the adrenal glands. So it's another source. So your body has this redundancy ability to produce hormones. Now, unfortunately, it's never quite as simple as it gets made, it stays at the right level, and away we go. There are other things included within the complications of the working body, and the thyroid is an element of that as well. It's in the same pathway from the hypothalamus through the thyroid down to the adrenal glands. In the same way, the pituitary gland is part of the stress response. So it all starts up with the brain, signals to other glands on the way down to send certain hormones around the body as signalers. So our thyroid, which does determine our metabolic rate, has a big impact on our metabolic rate, is also included in this process. And so looking after your thyroid is another element of staying well through, or staying healthy and maintaining those hormonal balances through menopause. What can you do? So I've got a sort of a hit list of 5 things, and these are in no particular order. But if we go back and explain about the adrenal glands and the fact that they do other jobs as well. One of the jobs that they're supposed to do is provide stress response hormones. So, we get our adrenaline and we get our, hence the name, adrenaline comes from our glands. They sit just on top of our kidneys. So they're quite small, but they're close to they're right in the center of our trunk. So they're on the main highway of arteries to be able to transport things around our body. And so they produce stress hormones as well. So thinking about the sorts of movements that you would want to be doing as you're going into menopause or going through menopause is more restorative type work, less high intensity type work. So the high intensity stuff is what cranks up those stress hormones. And the restorative work actually does the opposite, so it calms it down. So you want to be looking after your body and giving it that calm environment so that you're not putting too much stress on the adrenal glands to create the hormones that may be dropping as you go. So if you think about, there's almost a competition in the adrenal glands between stress hormones and sex hormones, and progesterone, particularly with the sex hormone competition, they feed from the same fuel source. So cholesterol is the original fuel source. So making sure we get some good healthy fats into our diet is what sets up the source of fuel, the fuel pool, if you like, for the creation of either sex hormones or stress hormones. And so looking after those stress levels and doing exercise that's restorative rather than high energy is going to tip the balance in favor of progesterone and away from cortisol. And so if we're always stressed with work, if we're always chasing our tail, if we're always a million things to do, if we're going to the gym and then hitting ourselves hard with some high intensity exercise, the body really never gets a chance to calm down and get some of that calmness to rebalance the demand on the adrenal glands for the right balance of hormones. And so sending those signals is a really important one to think about in terms of restorative working in exercises as opposed to working out exercises. So still work out, Go for walks. Don't go for high intensity stuff. Think about yoga, qigong, tai chi, things that allow your body to move, but don't force it into a high heart rate and deep, heavy breathing, fast, heavy breathing, because that's the stuff that's going to be sending the signals back to the adrenals going, we need more cortisol. So one of cortisol's jobs is an anti-inflammatory. So obviously we create inflammation in our body when we exercise. And so the job of cortisol is to go around and sort of mop up some of that inflammation, just calm the inflammation down in the body, allow our bodies to adapt to the exercise that we've done, and off we go again, healthy in health, everything balanced in health. If we keep pushing too hard on one side, the cortisol is going to stay up for longer, and our bodies aren't designed to have cortisol surging around it for long periods of time. It's supposed to come in, do its job, and come back out. And that will allow the progesterone to get to a healthy level. So restorative movement, I've kind of touched on this next one, but the perception of pressure and urgency, and I guess, in inverted commas, stress. There is a real value in having stress in our body. It's there for a reason. It helps us achieve certain things. It gives us that push. But at the same time, getting the balance right between urgency and calmness throughout our day and throughout our week, month, year is a really important one at this time, because as I talked about, there's that imbalance that will occur because we're asking more of those adrenal glands, particularly as the ovaries are beginning to produce less and less of their own sex hormones. So we're getting less of it into the body. So where it does come from, we need it to be a good source. And obviously we're interrupting that with the stress response. Talked about thyroid. And how we can support it is through good nutrition, essentially. Obviously thinking about that stress element, but selenium, really, really important. And of course, that's low in kiwi soil. So some good solid Brazil nuts from somewhere other than New Zealand. And you really want the Brazil nuts that have got some of that brown skin on the outside of them. So you don't want just the pale white selenium, Brazil nut. Because selenium is a really, really important one for the thyroid, as is zinc and iodine. So iodine is really, really important. You can either go for an iodized salt, which is a good quality iodized salt, or get some kelp into your diet. So seaweed or some source of seaweed where there's going to be high iodine levels is a useful thing to add into your diet. It doesn't have to be every single day, but as long as you're drip feeding that into your diet, it's going to be a really important one. And zinc's a big one. Generally, zinc is something that people are undernourished on, and zinc's often found in red meats, in eggs, I think oysters is quite high in zinc. So if you're into your shellfish, could be good for a zinc source. So that's thyroid. Supporting the adrenals. I've kind of talked on that already in terms of just managing that stress response. But really that is the key to keeping that healthy progesterone level up. And I've kind of talked a bit more about progesterone than estrogen. So let me just talk a bit more about estrogen. Obviously, those levels will be declining, but we can become estrogen dominant sometimes. When I say we, not me. Although I have been progesterone dominant, but that is another story. So how do we manage those estrogen levels? Now, our body actually makes estrogen from fat cells. So if we are overweight and carrying a bit of fat, then we will be pushing our estrogen levels up. And we don't want them to get out of hand. Now, you can either have what is perceived to be high estrogen because your progesterone is low, or your progesterone could be at a healthy level and your estrogen could actually be high. So it's relative to progesterone as to whether your body sees it as being high. And looking after your liver is a really important way of looking after or managing that estrogen level. And the way to do that is obviously to give your liver some love. And that means not giving it too many other things that it needs to be loaded with to detoxify. So think about the sorts of things that your liver has to work on. The obvious one is alcohol. If you've got alcohol going into your system all the time, your liver is all the time detoxifying. And it prioritizes that. So it will prioritize getting rid of alcohol out of your system ahead of digesting good food and using that good food to maximum effect in your body and absorbing the nutrients. So giving our liver a bit of a break now and again is a good thing. Making sure we're drinking plenty of water. because it needs water to do its job. And I will talk about structured water another time, but not just plain old water, but if you can drop some lemon juice in or some salt, it's going to structure your water and make it more bioavailable, more usable. So the liver needs that to optimize its function. The other thing it needs is a good level of healthy greens. Greens, particularly sort of bitter greens, are really, really important to help maximize liver function. So healthy leafy greens and also brassicas. So get plenty of brassicas into your diet as well. So if you're bumping up your vegetable content during the day, from breakfast, lunch and dinner, not just at dinner time, that's going to go a long way to support the liver. Give it some time off from alcohol as well. It's going to give it some support, and it's going to be able to do its job of clearing some of those estrogens. Now, when I say some of those estrogens, what I mean is that estrogen is a hormone made up of component parts. And some of those parts can be unhelpful to our health, to the point where one of those metabolites of estrogen is linked to cancer. So if that one particular one gets up too high, we're at a greater risk of cancer. So the liver will metabolize estrogen, break it down into a safe component, and then you'll excrete it through your body. So having a healthy digestive system that's working, so you're sitting on the toilet at least once, twice a day to excrete the waste, that helps escort the estrogen metabolites out of your body and keeps you safe. If the liver's struggling, it's working lots of toxins out of your system, so alcohol being one toxin, environmental toxins from foods, so things like E numbers and colorings and preservatives, food that's not natural, whole and unprocessed means that the liver's got to work harder to break it down and clear the rubbish out of it. So think about the diet as a whole in terms of how that's asking work of the liver. And if it's not working so hard, then it's going to be able to clear that estrogen. You're not going to have bad estrogen coming back into your system, because it's doing the full detoxification process right to the end, so that estrogen is cleared. But if it is loaded, then that may not be happening fully. So it's really, really important to try and look after it so that you know that estrogen is being cleared properly. So liver for estrogen, stress for progesterone. Those are kind of the two key elements and takeaways I would recommend from this. As I said, I'm going to drop some links in the comments below so that you've got other places to go to reference. For example, Wendy Sweet, who I talked about earlier, she does have an online program that is a really, really useful resource for people. And one last thing, so in the comments above, or in the title, I put why men should hear this too. And from 2 points of view, I guess from men who have got partners or wives who are going through menopause, to be a little more understanding is going to be a really useful thing. So having some of this knowledge themselves, helping manage their partner's stress and making sure they're not shoving an alcoholic drink under their nose every single night is going to go a long way to helping. But also men will also go through a hormonal change as they age as well. And typically what that means is that testosterone slowly declines. It's kind of well known that we have high testosterone in our teens as men. And then as we age, that testosterone starts to crest the curve and then slowly decline. And our hormones can be knocked out of whack as well. So if we're men who are particularly stressed and go through a long period of stress, that can knock out that same hormonal cycle that I talked about with progesterone, because cortisol is dominant. And so our bodies then find some compensation mechanisms that aren't ideal. So there's always redundancy built into the body, but trying to get back to a healthy state where we're looking after our bodies, looking after the stress levels, allowing our hormones to do their job, and the cortisol to calm down, dampen down and disappear out of our system, is going to let the progesterone and our testosterone build back up to healthy levels. So men can look after their testosterone primarily. One of the biggest ways is sleep. If you're sleep deprived, that's going to have an impact on your testosterone. And also stress. So sleep and stress are big ones. Looking after your body as you age is really, really important. If men are into the gym, then obviously lifting heavy weights is a good way of promoting testosterone as well. So that comes from the muscles. So just wanted to touch on that so that there's some value in that for men as well, because we need to look after our bodies in the same way. I heard an analogy, and this may appeal, the analogy between cars and men and women's bodies. So men's bodies are like the Toyota Hilux, so they can get beaten up and they'll just keep going and going and going. Whereas ladies' bodies are more like a Formula One car, so they're finely tuned. They're high performance, so one little thing goes out of whack and that car may not drive properly, won't be able to get up to full speed. And I think that's quite a nice analogy. I quite liked it in the fact that you can sort of visualize the difference between a Formula One car and a Toyota Hilux. That may not appeal to everybody, but I liked it. So on that note, I'll sign off, leave you to it. I hope there was some value in this live. Feel free to leave your comments underneath or questions. So if there is anything that you think, well, that doesn't make sense, or tell me more, then feel free to drop that in the comments below, and happy to keep chatting after this. I'm also keen to hear from you guys on other topics. So if there are other things that you want to hear about, then it could be health, it could be body, it could be whatever you're interested in. So feel free to drop the comments in below, and I will catch you next time. Cheers.